You wouldn't believe what happened when my mother-in-law handed me a manila envelope at Christmas and said, "I got you something special." Before I share what happened next, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. We were in her perfect, Pottery Barn catalog-looking living room in Connecticut, complete with matching stockings and garland-draped chandeliers. My husband, Ethan, was fiddling with the fireplace remote. My daughter Lily was trying not to fall asleep on the oversized couch, even though she'd been up since 6 a.m. opening presents. And I was pretending everything was fine, like I had been for the past 8 years. I took the envelope, smiled like I always did, and said, "Thank you, Marlene." That was thoughtful. Marlene's smile was tight. She had Botox, but I swear I could still see the smugness in her eyes. When I opened the envelope, I thought it might be some kind of bizarre Christmas card or a gift certificate. Instead, I found legal documents, divorce papers. Not signed yet, but pre-filled with my name, Ethan's name, and a draft of terms. I blinked. "It's a draft, of course," she said casually, sipping her wine. "I figured it would be easier for both of you if someone just got the ball rolling." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even look at Ethan, though I could feel his silence like a second fireplace behind me. I calmly slid the papers back into the envelope, stood up, and excused myself to put Lily to bed upstairs. As I tucked my daughter in, I kept hearing Marlene's voice in my head, "Got the ball rolling." Like this was a family game night. But let me back up a little, because that night didn't come out of nowhere. Ethan and I met in our late 20s. I was teaching 2nd grade at a public school in New Haven. He was in finance, some brokerage firm his dad pulled strings to get him into. When we met at a mutual friend's birthday party, he was charming and humble, almost awkward. I liked that. He listened more than he talked. Marlene didn't like me from day one. I wasn't from their world. I grew up in Bridgeport, raised by a single mom who worked as a nurse and drove a Corolla she couldn't afford to replace. I went to a state college, worked through school, and still had loans. Marlene made sure I knew my shoes were Brave and that my salad dressing choice at brunch was very East Coast budget conscious. After Ethan and I got engaged, she offered to help with the wedding. What that really meant was, she planned everything, down to what shade of blush my bridesmaids wore, and reminded me constantly that she was paying. I tried to pick my battles. I told myself this was what some mothers-in-law were like. Then came the house. We bought a fixer-upper in Westport. Ethan was on the mortgage, but most of the down payment came from my inheritance after my mom passed. Marlene called it your little renovation project, like it was a dollhouse, not a 3-bedroom colonial with a leaking roof. She offered to help again, which meant she took over, criticized my taste, and brought in her designer friends to consult. Ethan never pushed back. He said things like, "Just let her have this. It makes her feel needed," or "It's easier if we just go with her choices." Easier. That word started to rot. It was easier when I stayed home after Lily was born because daycare was expensive and Ethan's hours were crazy right now. It was easier when I gave up my side tutoring gig because Marlene said, a real mother should be present during these formative years. Easier when we used her accountant. Easier when we vacationed at her lake house. Easier when I bit my tongue every time she introduced me as Ethan's lovely wife. She used to be a teacher. Eventually, I stopped correcting her. I stopped talking in those rooms. And slowly, I stopped being seen. Until Christmas. Until the envelope. Until the moment I realized Marlene wasn't just a passive-aggressive mother-in-law. She was orchestrating something. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I walked back downstairs. Ethan was standing by the sink alone. His jaw was tight. "You knew?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "She mentioned something." I told her to drop it. I didn't know she actually did that. I believed him. Sort of. But I also saw what I hadn't wanted to see for years. He never told her no. Not really. Not when it mattered. He looked tired, maybe even sorry. But not surprised. And that said everything. I picked up the envelope, held it up, and said, "Merry Christmas." Then I walked upstairs and didn't come back down. That was the night I decided to stop being agreeable. I didn't rage. I didn't pack a bag or call a lawyer right away. Instead, I started watching, listening, documenting. I dug up old emails, found text threads where Marlene overstepped, where Ethan forwarded financial statements without my consent. I opened a new savings account. Quietly. Under my maiden name. I picked up tutoring gigs again, remote ones. I started building a small but steady stream of income. Nothing flashy. Just enough to remind myself that I could. And I waited. Not for revenge. Not exactly. But for the moment when I could reframe everything she'd taken from me. In the most literal way possible. I started with the little things. Things Marlene wouldn't notice, but I did. Like changing my bank notification settings so I'd see every transaction Ethan made. Like signing up for legal aid newsletters using a private email. Like setting up a shared drive and saving every single receipt, mortgage doc, and photo of the house renovations I'd funded with my mom's inheritance. My tutoring gigs picked up faster than I expected. A mom I used to work with referred me to a friend in Chicago who needed Zoom help for her dyslexic son. That turned into another parent, then another. By April, I was making nearly what I made back when I taught full-time, all under the radar. Ethan noticed I seemed busier, but he didn't ask much. He was too preoccupied with work, the market volatility, and his golf league. The usual distractions. We still lived in the same house, still shared dinners sometimes, still took Lily to her Saturday swim lessons. To the outside world, nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. I started therapy. Quietly. Online. My therapist, Jen, was this grounded woman in her 50s who had this way of listening without making you feel broken. She helped me untangle the difference between being nice and being complicit. Between keeping peace and losing your voice. She said something in one of our early sessions that stuck with me. When someone hands you a role you never auditioned for, you don't have to play the part. Marlene had cast me as the agreeable, quiet daughter-in-law. The grateful outsider. The woman lucky to be accepted into their pristine country club life. And for years, I played along. Smiled. Agreed. Softened my edges. No more. One afternoon in May, while Ethan was at work, I found a binder in his office labeled Family Holdings. Inside were financial statements, tax filings, and property records. It confirmed what I already suspected. The house was technically in Ethan's name only. A quiet change made 2 years ago, during a refinance I was told was routine. My stomach dropped. We used my inheritance for the down payment. I picked the house. I managed every contractor, picked every tile, painted the cabinets myself at night while Lily slept. But on paper, it was like I never existed. I took photos of every page, uploaded them to my hidden drive, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. That night at dinner, I looked across the table at Ethan while Lily talked about her science fair project, and I smiled. He had no idea. And for the first time in years, I felt power, not rage, not bitterness, just calm, cold clarity. I wasn't going to blow up my life in a blaze of fury. I was going to curate my exit. In June, Marlene invited us to her annual 4th of July party. Big event. Catered. Everyone in red, white, and blue. The kind of suburban holiday where people gossip under string lights and talk about school boards and tennis leagues. I told Ethan I'd come, but I was going to bring a thank you gift for Marlene. For what? He asked, half distracted by his phone. For last Christmas, I said with a little smile. She really went out of her way. He didn't ask what I meant. July came fast. On the morning of the party, I printed out a revised version of the divorce papers Marlene had gifted me. But I made a few edits. I added a timeline of events. Attached receipts. Screenshots. A notarized statement about the down payment and renovation contributions. And I had my lawyer draft an addendum. Any claim of sole ownership or inheritance-related dismissal is invalid, based on marital contribution and unjust enrichment. I printed it all on cream linen paper, tied it with a red ribbon, and placed it inside a clean white gift box. When we arrived at Marlene's party, she greeted us in a blue sundress and perfect curls. She air-kissed Lily, gave Ethan a glass of wine, and glanced at me with her usual condescension. "You look tired, dear," she said. "But I suppose that's motherhood." And hosting, I replied sweetly, handing her the box. This is for you. She looked confused, then delighted. She loved being admired, even falsely. You shouldn't have, she said, setting it aside. You're right, I said. But I did. I spent the rest of the party chatting with the other wives, playing with Lily and sipping my drink. When Marlene finally opened the box later that evening, she went pale. Ethan found me on the patio. What did you give her? He asked, his voice tight. Just some paperwork. Figured it was time to get the ball rolling. He stared at me confused. And I realized he genuinely didn't remember the envelope. The Christmas ambush. The moment that broke the last thread of my trust. Because for him, all of this was background noise. His mother, his job, our house, our life. It all moved around him like furniture he never had to rearrange. But I wasn't furniture. I was leaving the room. By August, I filed the papers officially. I had a place lined up, a small rental in New Haven, closer to my clients, close enough to Lily's school to keep stability. And I had leverage. Real leverage. When Ethan tried to play shocked victim, I laid out everything I'd gathered. Told him this wasn't revenge. It was rebalancing. And I wasn't asking for everything. Just what I built. He didn't fight. Because he knew. Deep down, he knew this was earned. And as for Marlene? She called me once. Left a voicemail with clipped words and a forced tone. I hope you're proud of yourself. You've embarrassed this family. I didn't call back. Because I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I was reclaiming what they tried to erase. The weeks after I filed were strangely quiet. Not peaceful, more like the silence after a tornado, when everything is still standing, but nothing is the same. Ethan moved into the guest room without discussion, like he was checking into a hotel. We kept conversations short and transactional, scheduling time with Lily like two people sharing office equipment. The house felt too big, too echoing, and every surface felt like a museum exhibit of a life that never quite belonged to me. Marlene, unsurprisingly, didn't disappear gracefully. She started calling Ethan constantly, loud, angry calls I could hear through the walls. Sometimes he'd mutter something about handling it, but mostly he just let her unload. One night, he was pacing the kitchen, voice low but tense, saying things like, I didn't know she was planning this, and Mom, stop, you're making it worse. He still didn't get it. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't impulsive. It was a slow bruise turning into a fracture. The first time I saw Marlene after the filing was at Lily's back-to-school night. She showed up unannounced, dressed like she was meeting the First Lady, pearls, cream blazer, hair sprayed solid. She smiled at other parents like we were the Kennedy family attending a charity gala. When she saw me at the refreshment table, she walked over like a queen approaching a servant. Playing the devoted mother now, she asked quietly, her lips barely moving. I took a sip of my lemonade and looked her directly in the eyes. Always have been. She leaned in, voice sharp. You blindsided him. A decent woman would have worked on her marriage instead of running away. No, I said calmly. A decent man would have protected his wife from being humiliated in his own home. Her expression didn't crack. Botox held it together, but her eyes twitched, just slightly. That moment should have felt triumphant, but it didn't. It just felt done. Tired. Like closing a door that never fully shut in the first place. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Ethan's attorney, a counterproposal. A disgusting one. It claimed Ethan was the primary financial contributor, that I left the workforce voluntarily, that the down payment had been a gift to the marital household, and that I was seeking unreasonable compensation based on emotional grievance. They offered me minimal alimony, no claim to the house, and a custody arrangement that made Lily a suitcase child. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the paper, my hands shaking for the first time in months. It wasn't Ethan's voice. It was Marlene's. Every word sounded like her. That night, I waited until Lily was asleep and went downstairs. Ethan was watching ESPN, half asleep on the couch. I set the papers in front of him. So this is what we're doing now? I asked. He rubbed his face, exhausted. My mom's lawyer said this is just a starting point. It's how things work. Things work, I repeated. Like when she changed the refinance terms. Like when she handed me divorce papers at Christmas. Like when you let her rearrange our life because it was easier. He didn't fight back. He rarely did. Instead, he said something I'll never forget. I can't deal with all this conflict. I just want it to be simple. Simple for who? He looked away. That was the moment I realized I wasn't losing my marriage. I'd already been alone for years. I was just finally admitting it. The next morning, my lawyer and I drafted a response. It wasn't dramatic or threatening. It was surgical. Every documented contribution. Every bank transfer. Photos, witness statements, renovation receipts, spreadsheets. All notarized. All time-stamped. And we added a sentence. If further false statements are submitted regarding financial history or parental allocation, we will file a motion requesting the release of all documentation in open court. Open court. The one place Marlene couldn't control the narrative. 2 days later, I got a text from Ethan. Can we talk? I agreed to meet at a coffee shop near Lily's school. He looked smaller than usual, like his clothes didn't fit right anymore. My mom is furious, he said immediately, like it was my job to fix that. I'm sure she is, I said. She's afraid you're trying to destroy our family's reputation. I laughed a little. Not loud. Just enough. You mean, tell the truth? He stared at the table. She wants to negotiate privately. Does she? She said she'd be willing to compensate you, off the record, if you drop any claims to the house. There it was. The big reveal. I leaned forward. And where would that money come from? He didn't answer. Marlene's trust. I asked. Or maybe the inheritance she pretends you earned? His face changed. Shame, anger, something breaking. You think she doesn't care about you, he said. But she does. She just doesn't know how to show it. No, I said gently. She knows exactly how. Gifts with strings. Help that turns into leverage. Control packaged as generosity. He looked hurt. And for a moment, I felt the familiar pull to take care of his feelings. To soften myself. To make it easier. But I didn't. There's no version of this, I said, where your mother buys back what she tried to take. I'm not negotiating in the dark. Everything stays above the table. He nodded slowly, defeated. She'll never forgive you. That's okay, I said. I stopped needing her approval a long time ago. What happened next was the final unraveling. 2 mornings later, Marlene showed up at the house without warning. She marched in like she still owned the place, holding a folder and a face full of manufactured composure. We need to talk, she announced. Privately. I stood in the doorway with my arms crossed. Everything can be said right here. She exhaled dramatically. Fine. I'll be direct. You will take the settlement we're offering. You will not drag this family name through the mud. And you will not take Lily away from her father. I blinked slowly. That's a lot of demands from someone with zero legal authority. Her voice sharpened. You are nothing without this family. We gave you a life you never could have built on your own. And just like that, something in me snapped, but not loudly. Not explosively. It was a clean break. I looked her straight in the eye and said, I built this life. Every inch of it. You just decorated the surface and called it ownership. She went silent. Then I walked to the dining table, picked up a perfectly framed copy of the original divorce papers she'd given me, the ones I'd had mounted behind glass as a reminder, and placed them gently in front of her. Her face twisted. What is this? A gift, I said softly. Since you love giving them. She stared at it like I'd handed her a live grenade. Ethan stepped into the room just in time to see her flush red. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I smiled, calm. Maybe, but not tonight. And without waiting for a response, I walked upstairs to start packing boxes. The last few weeks in the house felt like a slow-motion fade-out. Ethan and I moved through the space like ghosts, polite, cold, distant. Even Lily sensed it. She started asking more questions at bedtime. Are you and Daddy going to live in different houses? I never lied to her. Yes, sweetie. But we both still love you very much. She took that in quietly, like kids do. Like she was already adapting. The movers came on a cloudy Thursday. My new place was small, Just a two-bedroom with hardwood floors, a little balcony, and a window seat that Lily immediately claimed as her reading nook. It was mine. Fully mine. Every bill in my name. Every pillow chosen by me. No Marlene. No Ethan. No oversight masquerading as concern. I didn't throw a party. I didn't post some triumphant selfie with a glass of wine and a hashtag starting over caption. I just exhaled. One long, overdue breath. Word got out slowly. The other moms from Lily's school started texting me, not all at once, but trickles of "just heard, are you okay?" And I had no idea. "You always seemed so strong." Funny thing about those comments. They came from people who had watched me shrink for years and never said a word. Not until I made myself visible again. I wasn't angry. Just noted it. It was late September when the final mediation was scheduled. We didn't end up going to court, but we might as well have. It was held in a sleek law office with big windows, long tables, and the kind of silence that hums louder than noise. Ethan arrived first. He looked worn down, suit a little looser, hair slightly unkempt. He offered a half smile. I returned nothing. Marlene walked in 10 minutes later in a tailored black coat, with a leather folio clutched to her chest like armor. She avoided my eyes and sat next to her son like it was a throne. My lawyer, Vanessa, sharp as a whip and quiet as a scalpel, opened the meeting with a tone that didn't invite argument. We reviewed the asset division. The house to be sold within 6 months, proceeds split with documented reimbursement to me for renovation costs. Joint custody, but with primary placement to me due to Ethan's work travel. Financial records on the table. No private deals. No backroom pressure. Marlene's mouth twitched the entire time. At one point, she actually said, "This is so unnecessarily aggressive." Vanessa turned a page calmly. "Defending one's legal rights isn't aggression, ma'am. It's adulthood." I wish I could bottle that sentence. Ethan barely spoke. I think even he realized by then that trying to play peacemaker was a lost cause. He signed every page without protest. When it came time for me to sign, I paused. Not out of doubt. Out of recognition. That woman who walked into this marriage 8 years ago, naive, compromising, silencing herself in exchange for keeping the peace, she was gone. And the woman holding the pen now? She wasn't bitter. She wasn't broken. She was clear. I signed. And, just like that, it was done. The soft revenge people talk about? It wasn't the legal win. It wasn't the financial balance. It was what came after. Lily thrived. She became more open, more relaxed. We started cooking together, messy meals with music and laughter. She told me she liked our new apartment because it feels calm, like it can breathe. I applied for a part-time curriculum design position with a local charter school. Got it. They were building a remote learning wing and needed consultants. It felt good to be needed professionally again, not tolerated, not helped, not indulged. Just respected. And then came the final cherry on the cake I never wanted to bake. In December, almost exactly a year after the Christmas envelope, I was invited to speak at a local women's leadership panel. A friend I tutored for was organizing it. The theme? Reclaiming voice. Stories of quiet power. I hesitated at first. But then I remembered that version of me in Marlene's living room, swallowing humiliation in front of a fireplace. And I said yes. The night of the event, I wore a navy jumpsuit. Nothing flashy. Just strong. The room was full of women, teachers, small business owners, nonprofit leaders. I sat on the panel with 3 other women who shared stories of financial betrayal, career reinvention, and personal loss. When it was my turn, I didn't use names. I didn't take cheap shots. I just told the story of a woman who accepted an envelope one Christmas and decided to write her own ending. The crowd clapped quietly, respectfully. Afterward, in the lobby, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Carol, Marlene's cousin. The one who always smiled too big and drank too much wine at holidays. "I heard about everything," she said. "And, between us, good for you. We all knew. We just didn't know how to help." I didn't respond right away. Then I said, "Sometimes, the help we need is silence finally breaking." She nodded. A week later, I mailed Marlene a Christmas card. Nothing dramatic. No message inside. Just a single photograph. Me and Lily, laughing in our tiny kitchen, flour on our cheeks, joy in motion. No caption. No threat. Just proof of life. The kind of life she could never control. And that, more than any courtroom win or clever comeback, was my closure. I never heard back. But that was the point. Not every wound needs an apology. Some just need to stop bleeding. And mine finally did.